Good morning. Welcome back. It's Tuesday, August 5th, and today we're going to be talking about three important cases involving the First Amendment. The first of these cases is Tinker versus Des Moines, and this is a case that I'm sure in your prior legal studies with school law you've run across this case before. So today we're going to talk about it in some detail and use it as a basis for some of our discussion as we go through this course. I'm a product of the 1960s. I grew up in those days, and I certainly remember in my high school years the turbulence that we faced as a country, and as schools going through many changes with our social with the culture we were facing socially, politically, economically, etc. So this case, which was rendered in 1969, actually began in 1965 when students in a high school decided they wanted to wear armbands in support of a truce in the Vietnam War. Now, during those days in 1965, the Vietnam War was approaching its height. We were sending thousands of American soldiers to Vietnam to fight communism. We were drafting young men to go fight that war, and it was really becoming a very unpopular war. President Johnson at the time was spending lots of money, and we were beginning to see on television for the first time soldiers coming back to the United States in body bags, and lots of the reality of war was being played out every night on the 6 o'clock news. Well, apparently these young people wanted to support a proposed truce. They were going to wear armbands, black armbands, in support of the truce over the holidays. Well, the principals, the administrators of the school district, got wind of this, and they were extremely fearful that this type of protest was going to cause problems with running their schools. And in those days, you just simply didn't protest anything the principal wanted to do. And it scared administrators to death when students would gather together for anything like this. So they came up with a policy on their own, which to me is extremely interesting. When we hear that policy was created simply by a group of principals sitting around and trying to figure out how they might meet a protest. But anyway, they decided that students who were wearing the armbands would first be asked to take them off, and then if they didn't take them off, they'd be suspended. So certainly you had a couple that refused to take it off, and Mary Beth Tinker was one of them, and her parents sued in federal court saying that the administrators, the principals, didn't have the right to force her daughter to take off the armband, that it was a violation of the First Amendment and free speech. Well, the court decided that in fact it was a violation, that although this armband wasn't really the type of speech we generally think of it as being, that Justice Ford has said it was pure speech. You know, it was a symbol. And out of this decision became a very popular term that we still use today, and I used to hear from my school board attorney a lot, in that when a student steps on the school grounds, it doesn't mean they lose their First Amendment rights. Well, that's true. But how do we measure the First Amendment rights? How do we balance First Amendment rights and still be able to control a school? So that's something I want you to consider as you read Tinker. There are concurring opinions by other justices who also explain their opinion about First Amendment issues, but also take a look at the dissent in this case. There are only two justices that dissent. But I think it's important to read what they have to say about freedom of speech and First Assembly issues in public schools. Now, the other case that we're going to discuss very quickly is the case of Bethel School District versus Frazier. And in this, we have a student, Matthew Frazier, who was nominating a fellow student for elective office, and in his speech, which took place in 1985, by the way, he used some graphic sexual language, which I'm sure he got a laugh out of his audience when he used that, but it didn't really put a smile on the face of the principal or the administrators, and he was suspended for 2 days for violating the code of conduct. And the reason that the principal gave in suspending Matthew was that his conduct substantially interfered with the educational process. Well, in a 7-2 decision, the court said it was appropriate for school district officials to monitor and not allow vulgar and offensive language. And the reason they gave for this was that it's inconsistent with the fundamental values of public school education to allow this kind of behavior. So we see here in Bethel case is that the court says there must be limits on First Amendment behavior, and certainly administrators have a right to do this. Now, when we think about lewd and graphic sexual conduct today, I'm wondering how we might approach that and define that. As you read this case, I want you to think about some of the things we allow today that we certainly didn't allow in those days. So, and the other case that we want to think about in this week's assignment is Hazelwood School District versus Kuhlmeyer, in which we're talking about censorship in the school newspaper. The principal who did not approve of 2 articles in the school newspaper and ordered the removal from publication of from the newspaper itself. Was this a First Amendment violation, or did the principal have the right as principal to monitor the publication and take out those things that he felt were not appropriate? Now, this case brings into light many issues, and I want you to take a close look at this case to find out just how detailed and how technical some of these arguments go in terms of censorship. We'll be talking more later on about censorship, but this is a very interesting decision. In a 5-3 decision, the court said the principal was right. You know, he did have the right to take these articles out. You know, he was the chief officer of the school. He was the head administrator. It was up to him to be able to determine what kind of articles he felt appropriate for students to read. So, again, 3 important cases this week. Read them. And as you read them, take a look at the forum question this week as well. Now we have social media. I want you to think about these cases in relationship to Facebook. Do the First Amendment rules still apply? What have you been told by your principals, by your superintendent, by your school board attorney in terms of First Amendment issues in light of these 3 cases? Does it create a completely different argument? So I look for some great comments from you this week, and I hope you have a great week. Thanks.